Get ready to dive into the comic book realm, where heroes rise and villains take the helm. We're here to dissect the stories and the art. Our source material, we tear the panels apart.
There's Lucky! Get us Lucky Charms! They're magically delicious!
Always after me Lucky Charms, the frosted oat cereal with sweet surprises. Pink hearts, yellow moons, orange stars, green clovers, and blue diamonds. Part of a complete breakfast. Oh, they're coming. I'll make a rocket and fly away. Whoops!
Frosted Lucky Charms!
They're magically delicious.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Comics Podcast. If you look outside, the leaves may be falling onto the ground. You might find a jack-o'-lantern still out there somewhere. We've already done our trick-or-treat because apparently we're backwards Appalachian people up here, according to Mark. That's right, Halloween, right around the corner. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be talking a very spooky book tonight. And joining me this evening, one, Alexis Hannah. How you doing, Alexis?
Doing very good. I had my Halloween party a few nights ago. Quickly realized that 40 years old, it's like I could still party like I like to. I sure as hell can't recover like I used to.
What's the joke from 30 Rock? You will get old one day.
Mm-hmm. It's the truth. Dorian Price, welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show. I'm glad you got to join us here. We're talking something spooky, so this should be right up your alley. Alexis, why don't you let our listeners know what book we're talking about and what drew you to this?
This is Serial Sweet Darkness. This is written by Mark Russell and Peter. Wow, I do not know how to pronounce that name.
I'll spell it Snejbjerg. So I have yet no clue.
I found out about this book from our mutual friend, Mr. Nate Jones, who likes to take pictures of whatever books he's bought and put them on Facebook. And I thought he's a really good barometer of what are really good books. I think he's got really good taste. So I saw this and I'm like, this looks too interesting to pass up. So I bought it. The idea of this is your classic gothic monster story. We have the vampire with his bride who is desperate to avoid being found, and he is just lost in his eternal damnation. We have the man who was abducted and turned into Frankensteinish monster, and his brother who is killed and condemned to follow the world as a phantom. And we have them joining forces with the leader of a mythical race of leprechauns, fighting to stop this evil general who is trying to take over their world. And now this sounds probably like something you would have read in 10th grade literature class, but here's the switch, is that these characters are the classic serial monsters. Yeah. Count Chocula, Frankenberry, Boo Berry, Elsie from Lucky Charms, and the evil general is General Mills.
So here's the thing. Well, I had it planned to bring up later. At the beginning of this, they talk about General Mills, but there is also General Post. I didn't know if those were one and the same. At least the copy that I was reading had a General Post who was the one over the monsters like Toucan Sam and Fruit Brute. But anyway, at the beginning, it says General Mills. I know that because I looked like 3 times. Later on, they keep talking about General Post. Are they talking about the same person? Just to get my confusion out of the way, if I start talking about General Post, I'm also talking about General Mills. General Mills feels like it fits. Mm-hmm. But at some point, they made it Post, and I was like, okay, I don't know why. Obviously, it's serial related. I assume there was some kind of a reason, unless they're 2 different people, which I don't think they are. I do refer to General Post a lot in my synopsis. He was the guy that caused Frankenberry. He's the guy that created Fruit Brute in this story. So Mark Russell, we have a history of books with him on the channel. Mark was really impressed with Mark Russell's take on the Flintstones. We did a Flintstones episode at least 7, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, where Mark just like, okay, let's do the Flintstones. We had no idea what we were getting. Radulich, I should say. Radulich was like, let's do the Flintstones. Let's see what we get into. Me, Ronnie, and Mark, we read this Flintstones book, and we are just blown away at how he took those characters and told a lot of great stories along with some really interesting social commentary. Ronnie hated it because it ruined his childhood. And while me and Mark are sitting there going like, they're talking about polyamory in this thing. They're talking about like just a lot of societal issues that you wouldn't know, religion that could be approached with these characters. He went on and did Snagglepuss, Exit Stage Left, I think
Great
is what it is.
book. Such a good book.
Wow. What a book.
Exit Stage Left, laughing all the way.
That story took place during McCarthyism, which I think was the 60s. And and there was all sorts of like real world events that were kind of tied into this because he was a gay Gothic playwright. Mark Russell took that property and told some really great stories with it, ruined Ronnie's childhood in the process even more. So it was a lot of fun. But, we had
our collective childhoods have all been completely ruined. By point.
I think what it is, though, is it's like these people grew up with these characters and felt like, okay, I can tell an adult story with these characters. And Mark Russell does a good job. There's kind of like our history with them. We also did Not All Robots, which I think was Mark Russell as well. Me and Mark did that a while back, a couple years ago. Another story about, the robots take over. Well, I was going to say take over the world, but they're a big part of the world. And we rely on robots enough to where they have taken over. But again, telling a great story, allegories to modern day times and some of the situations that many humans face. There's a bit of history with Mark Russell for the channel to kind of throw out what I've got on him as far as career wise, what he did. In 2015, Mark Russell writes a book called God is Disappointed in You. And it's caught the eye of a lot of people. It's really popular, and I believe it's a graphic novel.
I think God is Disappointed in You. Mark Russell needs to have that as a epitaph when he passes on.
Yeah. He also publishes Apocrypha Now, which covers books that were not included in the Jewish and Christian Bibles. In addition, he begins posting humorous stories about cereal mascots and dialogues between Huckleberry Hound and Snagglepuss on Facebook. I should say that was before 2015. Marie Javins notices his work, and at first he thinks that she likes what he's done with God is Disappointed in You and says, hey, why don't you come on and write a book? There was a book that was canceled. I want to say it was in the 80s, maybe the late 70s, called Prez, where this teenager takes over as president. And she's like, here's the reins to this. Why don't you tell a good story with this? I like the work that you do. But he finds out that it's not because of what he did with God is Disappointed in You. It's because of some Count Chocula fan fiction he was writing on Facebook. So here we are 9 years later, and we finally get something very similar to what he's wrote, I assume, online on Facebook.
Living the dream, getting picked up because of his fan fiction. Every nerd's fantasy.
That's the truth. That's the truth. So there you go. That's a brief history of Mark Russell and a couple of things in his career that led him to where we're at right now. Dorian, you wanted to come on. You wanted to talk cereal. Was there anything that stuck out to you other than the premise, or what were your thoughts before we get into talking about the book itself?
This was fun for me, mostly because when I got done with the series, I was like, man, this should be a movie. With all the stuff that we're redoing, like in First Omen and even The Crow, this should be a movie, because this would have been amazing for all the older fans who are fans of like Monster Squad and stuff like that. This would have drawn them in. You would have got horror fans that are my age in their late 20s. This would have been perfect. It's a fantastic comic book. I want to be clear to our audience. I am not shitting on the comic book. The comic book is amazing. It's just like, why couldn't this have been a movie? Why aren't we spending money on this?
Could you imagine? Okay, I would say this needs to be an animated movie on Netflix.
I would disagree. I think this needs to be live action because, again, I think there's so many actors we have out there who would love to play these iconic cereal mascots they grew up with, and they could bring love to it because, again, that's what they grew up with. I think an animated thing would work, but honestly, a live action one, we need another Monster Squad.
Without a question. The thing that draws me to the animation is that the artist, Peter, can't pronounce your last name, is the main artist and colorist, and he did the collection cover, is that he really utilizes the color theme of the monsters. The Phantom, Blueberry is blue, Frankenberry is pink, Count Chocula has shades of brown, the King of the Leprechauns has shades of green, and I think that would really work with good lighting tricks in live action, but I think with animation you could have a little bit more fun with the stylized color use. So that's more where my mind is going. I am the Bradlich and Broadcasting's VP of animation. I'm a sucker for really well done cartoons.
It must be animated.
that is, not to mention, this artwork is so beautiful. It is designed to look like classic Gothic stories. Count Chocula, you recognize Count Chocula mostly because he's got the absurd halfway Gary Oldman hairdo, as I'm going to call it. But
balloon butt.
Yeah, but he looks like a real vampire. It looks really good. And Frankenberry doesn't look anything like Frankenstein's monster. He looks like a golem, like a horribly mutated, stitched together monster. Frankenberry is not Frankenberry. Booberry is a phantom, but he looks like a skeleton who's on fire. Fire.
I was going to dress up as Booberry, but I couldn't get the costume together in time. Over the last few podcasts, those of you who are listening just by audio, I had told Alexis I will not show up dressed as Count Chocula, and I
just didn't want to see you do that with your hair. Okay, I have my limits.
Wouldn't be Count Chocula, but Blueberry was still on the table, huh?
But again, I wanted to support the comic book, and I was like, I wasn't able to get the. Yeah, I'm
that's all right.
So
I think one of the things that sticks out to me here, specifically for this book, is the world building. That it's all been there. It's somebody's wanted to tell tales about these characters, why they are who they are. You could do that as a one-off and not really hit, like Mark Russell did, I think. And he did a great job of like, okay, here's all these characters. Here is the world that they live in and how it all ties together. And that is a real challenge sometimes for some storytellers. If I wanted to, I'd love to get either a franchise animation or live action film of like 3 or 4 films that are taking place with all these, because there's so much more out there to use. What we get in here is a great story, but I mean, my goodness, I'm sitting there thinking like all these other ones, and there's like little cameos of people that show up and you're like, oh my gosh, I want some more about the guy that looks like the Cheerios bee or whatever his name is.
This is what Food Fight should have been.
And actually, Jesse, something fun to do after we've talked about the storyline and stuff. What if we cast a live action?
Oh man, I'd love to participate. I don't know if I could do it. But I'd love to try.
It'd be fun for our audience.
Keep it on the plate.
But I do love this idea of using traditional. I don't think a lot of the younger generation. What is this new generation called? Generation Alpha? Is that what they're called?
I think so.
I don't think they realize just how much individual mascots were central to the marketing of our food and all of our purchases growing up in the 80s and 90s. Everything had to have a mascot, a cute, colorful cartoon character that starred in the commercials. I mean, you guys remember like when there was actually like continuing stories between the commercials,
well, like with the Trix Rabbit, I think is one thing I remember for sure. Like, is he ever going to get Trix? Is he ever going to get it? Lucky Charms is the same way. I can remember he's trying to keep the kids away, I think, if I remember correctly. But anyway, that's about the only story that I can remember off the top of my head was the big overarching, are these guys going to be able to succeed against the kids trying to eat the cereal?
Nostalgia Critic has done a whole thing on commercials. And that's how I was introduced to a whole bunch of 80s and early 90s commercials. He has Captain Crunch do the same thing. There was like actually a contest that you could apparently go into. And it's like, can you save Captain Crunch from, I don't remember what it was, but it was something like,
the Soggies.
The Soggies. There was this continuing storyline that's really fun.
They actually had continuances. I remember one commercial, and it was for Trix, where they were like, Trix Rabbit's going to enter a race, and it's a race for kids. And at the end, he's discovered, it's like, will the Trix Rabbit get his reward? You can vote, and the kids could. And this was pre-internet, kids, so we couldn't go to the website and say, yes, he should have the Trix cereal. No, we had to do the whole
cut off the back,
cut off the back of the box and mail it in with parents' permission.
Call the 900 number. Get your parents' permission first.
Will Batman and Robin be able to escape the Riddler's trap? Tune in next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.
And it was also a big thing for marketing when they would release something new. I keep going to the Trix Rabbit because Trix did this a lot. I still remember when Trix was red, orange, and yellow only, and they revealed green for the first time. And I remember when they revealed blue for the first time. I am that old, folks. I remember when Trix was 3 colors.
I've been watching the History Channel, and they did a show. It's on Hulu right now. There's 3 or 4 seasons. The Food That Built America. And
I
we
love that
just-
series. Yeah.
Yeah, they just did one on breakfast cereals. It's fantastic. 45 minutes well spent. I'm learning about how they came up with Fruit Loops, which was like some guy was mad about Cheerios, and he was like, what can we do with this? Oh, I got an idea. Let's do Fruit Loops. They talked about making Fruity Pebbles in that too, which was great stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, and then Cheerios came out with Fruity Cheerios, and as John Oliver said, screw you, you're knockoff Fruit Loops, and you know it.
Perfect. All right, so we'll talk about the first 3 chapters just to kind of throw this out here.
Okay, today's topic. Captain's outdated, you say? Au contraire.
No denying this nautical wild man's great crunch.
Losers! But this I love. Dorian! Now, come on, you guys. You guys can get this great crunch at the store. And this.
Captain Crunch is part of a balanced breakfast.
Now, don't get me wrong, I love this guy, but Captain, ditch the hat, all right?
Whoa. Check out that dude.
Keep the hat! Keep the hat! All right, time to crunch up. Later.
Serial, Chapter 1, Dark Chocolate. In the land of Chocolavania, the tortured Marquis de Coco leads a double life. By day, he is the celebrated face of the villagers' loved breakfast cereal, but in truth, he is a vampire. Hosting extravagant breakfast feasts to mask his dark secret, he hides from the very people who revere him. As each morning stretches on, the Marquis battles not only the rising sun, but also the growing suspicions of his guests, including his rival, Duke L'Orange, who is determined to expose the truth. Duke L'Orange attempts to lure Lady Coco, the Marquis's wife, away from her cursed husband, but she harbors a secret of her own. To protect the Marquis and their love, she begs him to turn her into a vampire, choosing eternal darkness over abandoning him. That night, Lady Coco confronts Duke L'Orange, not to flee with him, but to use her newfound vampiric power to end his meddling once and for all. She slays him, ensuring the Marquis's secret is safe, but at a great cost. Now bound together as creatures of the night, the Marquis and Lady Coco live an eternal existence of torment. The lavish breakfast parties continue, but the tragic irony deepens. The Marquis, once struggling to hide his affliction, now shares his eternal curse with his beloved. 2 doomed souls, forever trapped in darkness, haunting the very world they sought to protect. In Chapter 2, The Tragic Tale of Frankenberry. In this story, we follow a man whose life and legacy have been stolen, embarking on a desperate mission to reclaim what's his. General Mills / Post, a powerful figure, is tightening his grip in the land. In a last-ditch effort, Frankenberry sets off to sea, aiming to reach Fortress Honeycomb. His mission is clear. He must gain the alliance of the Leprechaun Kingdom to fight back. But betrayal lurks, and Captain Crackle, the man tasked with delivering him, reveals his treachery, handing Cherry over to the enemy. Captured and stripped of his identity, Franken is subjected to dark experiments in a grim laboratory, his body transformed into a monstrous creation. Reborn as a grotesque version of himself, he wrestles with his humanity while being forced to serve under the twisted General Post. However, Franken's spirit remains unbroken, and in a moment of rage and confusion, he escapes. But in his altered state, he's horrified by his own power, unable to control his monstrous strength. His attempts to return home only lead to fear and rejection from those he once knew. In the end, Frankenberry realizes that he has become the very thing he sought to destroy, a hunted creature forever exiled from his own home. The tale concludes with Franken returning to the place of his torment, collapsing at the feet of his captors. His captor, ever taunting, offers him breakfast, a cruel reminder of the life Frankenberry once had, now lost to the monstrous identity forced upon him. Chapter 3, The Leprechaun King. In this epic tale, steeped in betrayal, power, and vengeance, all centered around a magical crown of immense power. Captain Crackle, a treacherous pirate, meets with a mysterious leprechaun in a tavern called Ye Crisped Rice, where they discuss the weight of trading lives for treasures. Crackle is meeting to acquire the Crown of the Four Wisdoms, a relic with the power to bestow formidable abilities, even raising the dead. The crown's power lies in 4 symbols: the pink heart for courage, the blue diamond for wealth, the yellow moon for knowledge, and the green clover for fertility. As battles rage and armies clash over the crown, Crackle contemplates his treachery. He recalls betraying Frankenberry, leading to the tragic downfall of the nobleman, and is eager to abuse the crown's potential power. Meanwhile, Crackle's leprechaun guest tells how the Leprechaun King, the rightful owner of the crown, failed his kingdom by forsaking the 4 guiding wisdoms, leading to his death. As Crackle reaches out to take the crown, its power manifests the ghost of Bo Berry, who had been killed by Crackle days earlier. Crackle is gruesomely slain by the vengeful spirit, allowing the leprechaun to place the crown upon his head. The leprechaun's next stop, Fortress Honeycomb, where he will confront General Post in a final act of penance and vengeance. With the crown's curse hanging heavy, the leprechaun does not expect to return, prepared to trade his life in the ultimate pursuit of justice. Duke L'Orange, which, by the way, is that an analog for any mascot, Duke L'Orange?
I think it's just a parody of
I have
Duck
no
orange
idea.
sauce.
Because
He does say something about how I'm a dinner person anyway. So I figured it was just a joke that he was a dinner meal eating at breakfast. Because I have searched high and low. I cannot find an orange themed cereal
Mascot even.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's been orange themed cereal at one point, but I don't think there was a mascot involved. Anyway,
Duke L'Orange was apparently a bad guy from the Mighty Ducks series.
are you serious?
Why does that not surprise me?
Oh, wow. Well, duly noted.
Don't think it's supposed to be that character. I think it is just a parody
I
of the
apparently
name.
had not researched it the right way, so and this time I apparently put it in the right way, and it was like, yeah, no, Duke L'Orange is a bad guy from Mighty Ducks.
All right. Chapter 2, The Tragic Tale of Frankencherry, where we learn about Frankencherry, and he ends up getting captured by General Post / Mills. He believes he's going to go meet up with him, and he's betrayed by Captain Crackle, which, again, I was thinking, are we thinking of Snap, Crackle, and Pop? Because Snap, Crackle, and Pop show up later, right? As part of
I think that's supposed to. Yeah, I think it's Captain Crunch, considering he does show up earlier as a guest, and he has got the iconic mustache. So I think Captain Crackle is supposed to be. So even though I don't think his name was, I think it was like Captain Magellan Horatio Crunch, because they actually let people name him in a contest.
Okay.
And I'm trying to find if Frankencherry was ever the name of the cereal or not. I can't find anything that says Frankenberry used to be cherry. It's always been a strawberry cereal from what I can find.
Russell's probably done some type of work here. Or, maybe there were some situations where the whole Mills Post thing took place where they're like, okay, Frankencherry, Frankenberry. We know they're the Berry brothers because it's Franken and Bo. And that's definitely mentioned in here. Maybe the place they lived was referred to as Cherry Estate or something along those lines. Well,
I think it also should be noted, though, I don't think they ever got anyone's rights for these characters, so I'm pretty sure they had to change a few things around to make sure that they didn't have some lawyers coming after them.
The other thing I was thinking too, you probably got to be treading lightly so you don't ruffle any feathers, because this is not a happy-go-lucky tale. This is a story that is pretty depressing by the time we reach the end of it. While there are some victories held by the heroes, it's not exactly
it's
great.
Halloween. We don't get to have a happy ending.
Right. So, all right, Frankencherry, who gets captured, basically betrayed by Captain Crackle, and General Post takes him and turns him into this Frankenstein monster. And that's where we get to meet all of the other crazy concoctions that General Post / Mills has come up with, which includes the Fruit Brute and Toucan Sam. The Fruit Brute, he's sort of like a werewolf. He doesn't want to hurt anybody, but when fruit's involved, just completely loses his stuff and goes on a murderous rampage to get this fruit. Toucan Sam, who
for flavors of fruit, we summon the brute. And we should also note the Cookie Wizard. That was one of the earlier mascots for Cookie Crisp, who is essentially his Dr. Frankenstein, or his Igor. That was pronounced Igor. Rest in peace, Terry Gar. You will be missed.
Rest in peace. So there we go. That's our second chapter. And then our third chapter, The Leprechaun King, where we get to learn about essentially the analog to Lucky, the leprechaun's name.
His name is just LC. He is the king of the Leprechaun Kingdom. I do love it because it's like, where are you heading, my lord? Fortress Honeycomb. Honeycomb's big. Aye, 'tis not small. I have to go into it again. The first time I read through this, I took this book to a doctor's appointment. Found out that holding your cell phone can lead to higher blood pressure because it makes you think of doom scrolling. I didn't want my doctor to think my blood pressure was going back up. I was trying to keep it at a normal level. I'm scared of doctors offices. So I was already a little nervous. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm going to take one of my graphic novels. I'm going to read that in the waiting room. So I took this one. It was an early morning appointment. I'm sitting there surrounded by mostly elderly people in this waiting room, and I am laughing at this book in front of all these people, all these elderly folks who are just staring at me like I have lost my freaking mind.
Nice.
And yeah, the whole Fortress Honeycomb was one of the moments where I couldn't control myself.
Did your blood, the real story needs to be told here. What was your blood pressure okay?
Yeah, actually, it went down. The science works. You know, there's actually something to take away from that. If you're having panic attacks, if you're feeling extra frustrated, put your phone down. It can help. You know, it's like, I know we're all glued to our phones and I know they're very useful tools, but put your phone down. It'll help you feel better.
All right. Well, the Leprechaun King, where we get to learn about the Leprechaun King who has this crown.
The crown of the four wisdoms.
The four wisdoms, which is a great way of explaining the stars, moons, clovers, and what's the other one? Oh my goodness. Diamond.
The pink heart stands for courage in battle. The blue diamond represents prudence and wealth. The yellow moon is for knowledge of the stars, portents, and magic. And finally, the green clover for the fruitfulness of the land. I wonder if that is how they originally chose those four symbols, because that kind of makes sense.
It does. And it's a great way of using those, which is, you know, you mentioned how many, as we were younger, all these commercials and this lore, you know, all the lore that was put into all of this before this book even came into play, all the lore that fell with these mascots and the stars, moons, clovers, and what was going on. Why was LC always trying to get and nobody, you know, keep the kids from his Lucky Charms? Anyway,
tell me you've heard Patton Oswalt's bit about the occult of Lucky Charms.
I don't know if I have. I might have.
It's hilarious. Let's just say he points out that the whole grain cereal that nobody likes seems to be in symbols representing Christianity, and the fun marshmallows that all the kids like is in symbols representing pagan symbols. So that's why I love Patton Oswalt. It's just like, that is so freaking adorably absurd.
Man, oh man. So, okay. Leprechaun King apparently going to give his crown away.
The wine of vengeance is very sweet. In fact, it's magically delicious. Again, the writing in this book is so funny. I cannot get over how well they introduce all of these catchphrases that we grew up with from commercials and put them in, and it doesn't sound forced or anything. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's good.
I was not expecting it to be so funny. I think there are fewer and fewer people who understand the tone necessary for satire. We end up too often with people who just end up like those guys who did like epic movie and disaster movie. It's like, no, throwing in references is not satire. But you could argue, well, this throws in references. I'm like, yes, but it makes it work. They're references that work into the story. If you had never heard of these serials, had never watched these commercials, had no idea what these catchphrases are, it wouldn't detract from it. You think, interesting word choice, but okay. You know, it's like, again,
it's like an Easter egg for the people that know.
Yeah, like the whole thing with Fortress Honeycomb. Honeycomb's big. Aye, 'tis not small. It's like, yes, that's hilarious, but also it's just you guys talking about this fortress they have to go to. So, you know, it works. And I was not expecting such good satire to be woven into the dialogue of this. I was very surprised with how funny it was and how well written it was.
I was expecting some type of commentary because it was Mark Russell. And what I experienced before, these first three chapters of this story, I was like, oh, okay, he's going to be pretty straight-laced with this. He's not trying to make any type of statement. What he's doing is telling a story with these characters and trying to tell a good story. None of the social commentary that was in a lot of the other stuff is in here, which is fine by me. I like Mark Russell when he's making a decision or making a comment about something. And now I'm getting the opportunity to read him pretty well straight-laced and try and tell a story with these characters, which is great. I have it in my notes here. Dig 'em, the Smacks frog, who is the only time we see Diggum the frog is
He's
when he's
digging graves.
He's digging graves, which is great. And when I saw him go dig them, I was like, oh my gosh, that's great stuff right there. I talked already about how I loved how they used the crown of the four wisdoms and kind of talk about that. And that's a central piece. It's kind of like this one ring deal to me. I mean, that's what it feels like. We have this big MacGuffin, this big central weapon that everybody is trying to get their hands on. But of course, once you get your hands on it, as much as you want it to give you your wishes, it's like the genie's lamp. It's going to grant you your wish, but you better watch out for the ghost that it brings and turns around and kills you. I see. Yeah, Dorian had to leave. He's got some personal issues with a buddy of his, which is unfortunate. I'm sorry we lost him. What are your thoughts on the first 3 chapters? Any notes that stick out to you? Anything you want to talk about?
I think they're a really good way of introducing the main characters of play. Obviously, we get a few more, but we have the main ones here. We have the General, the Marquis, his bride, the King of the Leprechauns, Franken. We have Bo. We have the Fruit Brute. We have Toucan Sam. This is a really good way to help, start things off and give you the idea. It's like, okay, this is what you're in for, and these are the main characters at play.
Building a world, yeah, and getting your characters out there and let you know who they are. Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, chapters 4 through 6.
Time to go down to the basement for some more hauntingly delicious Count Chocula cereal.
Don't look in the basement.
Those eyes are looking at me. Think I'll get some fruity Frankenberry from the cupboard.
Don't look in the cupboard.
Oh, those eyes, they move.
Now the spooky, delicious part of your complete breakfast is even spookier.
Now Chocula's eyes really move. So did Frankenberry's.
He is looking at you, kids.
Chapter 4, To Hell Comes a Guest. In these pages, the story delves deeper into the emotional and moral struggles of the characters. The Leprechaun King continues his path of redemption and determination, seeking to confront General Post, who seems to be a looming and dangerous figure. The dark, gothic atmosphere intensifies, especially as vampires, represented by the Marquis and his wife, confront their own tortured existence. The notion of cowardice, duty, and betrayal is palpable in these exchanges as the characters wrestle with their sins and their future paths. The Leprechaun King seeks not vengeance but redemption, telling the Marquis he's not there to condemn him, but to save him. Yes, that's right, the Leprechaun King has visited Chocolovania here. The Marquis, on the other hand, is torn between his desire to protect his love and his eternal guilt and survival instincts. His confrontation with the specter of Bo Berry and the ghostly reminder that they are all the result of long past sins highlights the ongoing consequences of their actions. As the sun rises, the Marquis reflects on his existence as a vampire, noting that while he may live forever, it is an eternal life spent in darkness. Meanwhile, his wife has left with the Leprechaun King and the specter to confront her father, General Post, showing her resolve to put an end to his madness, either through his repentance or his destruction. The final page hints at a coming reckoning with townsfolk of Chocolovania in a fiery frenzy, shouting to burn him, likely indicating the Marquis' secret has been found out. Chapter 5, A Devil's Advocate. The story continues with the Marquis de Coco facing his fate at the hands of a murderous mob. Bound at the stake and accused of vampirism, the Marquis finds himself moments away from being burned alive. The mob, led by a Quaker constable, demands justice, believing the Marquis to be responsible for a grisly massacre. The Quaker, embodying moral righteousness and self-declared justice, takes control of the situation, stating the only way to prove guilt or innocence is to expose the Marquis to sunlight. If he burns, he's a vampire. If not, he's innocent. Tensions run high as the crowd roars for blood, driven by fear and vengeance. Despite the mob's violent intent, the Quaker appears confident in his judgment and disturbingly sees the vampire as agents of God's wrath, not demons, but the executioners of divine punishment. In his mind, vampires do not merely consume life, they serve a higher purpose, purging society of those deemed unworthy. As the crowd had went home, he releases the Marquis, not to spare him, but to enable him to continue his God-given work, revealing the sinister belief that the Marquis is not cursed, but rather the curse itself. contemplating his dark fate. He acknowledges that while vampires prey on the weak and easily forgotten, there is another type of prey, those who can expose them to the light. As the scene unfolds, the Quaker becomes his target. The Marquis acts and attacks the Quaker, turning him into a vampire. Before anything irreversible happens, the Marquis decides to take his leave after chaining the Quaker to the post. The next morning, the crowd gathers to witness what they believe will be the burning of a vampire. They marvel at the grotesque spectacle as the figure tied to the stake burns to ashes, confirming in their eyes that the man was indeed a vampire. As the Marquis watches from afar, hidden from the light, he knows that word of his execution as a vampire will soon spread, and with it, his lands and castle will be lost. He is now on the run, with no turning back, with plans to head to Fortress Honeycomb to join his wife and confront General Post. And as we reach our climax in Chapter 6, The Land of Milk and Honeycomb. This tale unfolds at Fortress Honeycomb, a massive fortified stronghold. General Post, an enigmatic and authoritarian figure, reigns over a dark army and subjects the inhabitants to his twisted ideals. Lady Coco, disguised as his loyal daughter, arrives with a gift, a supposed crown of great power, and the enigmatic Leprechaun King. We witness General Post's chilling philosophy on strength and survival. He dismisses morality as a weakness, claiming that the cruelties he inflicts are not acts of cruelty but demonstrations of necessity. The General's twisted worldview reveals itself as he lectures on the nobility of breakfast, a meal of action, compared to what he derides as the decadent indulgences of lunch and dinner. In his vision, a brutal hierarchy divides those who feast to survive and those who are soft and decadent. His loyal followers echo this doctrine with fervor, positioning breakfast as a symbolic ritual of strength. Lady Coco offers the crown to her father with a smile, the moment laden with double meaning. As she holds out the crown, ostensibly a treasure of immense power, it becomes clear that her gift may carry unforeseen consequences. In the meantime, General Post demands that Lady Coco reveal the origins of her treasure. With surprising theatricality, she presents the Leprechaun King. The story delves briefly into the Leprechaun King's regretful history, revealing a ruler who lost everything when General Post's forces overran his land. Now, as the tale proceeds, General Post begins to reveal his suspicions, dismissing his daughter's tale and betraying her by presenting her with a gift of his own, chains of pure silver meant to restrain her vampiric powers. Post's ruthlessness is on full display, chaining Lady Coco, while the Leprechaun King and others watch in horror. However, the general's disdain for his daughter and allies hints at his hunger for power above all else, especially the legendary crown of the Four Wisdoms. The general revels in his cunning, reminding them that the enemies can often be more reliable than friends, as he savors the success of his betrayal. As dawn approaches, General Post prepares for the next phase of his plan, capturing Lady Coco and taking perverse pleasure in her agony under the sun's light. She is subjected to a brutal form of punishment, burning her under the rising sun as a reminder of her father's merciless rule. Despite the pleas of his advisors, the general dismisses any concerns about the mystical powers tied to the crown, choosing instead to focus on a grand breakfast. The Leprechaun King and Franken begin to see a glimmer of hope in this dire setting. They realize that they have only one chance to strike against the general, but even now, hesitation and uncertainty hold them back. With the general savoring his control, his monstrous guests uneasily contemplate their roles in his empire. Yet as Post taunts his captives, his twisted breakfast coming to an end, a final thought lingers. There may be one last piece on this board, one final move in the shadowy game of betrayal and revenge. The sun rises and Lady Coco's burning agony is prolonged, the repeated exposure from years of breakfast parties rendering her body partially tolerant to the sun, but only enough to amplify her torment. As she endures her love, the Marquis arrives, braving the flames to share her suffering. He embraces her, determined to lessen her pain by enduring it together. Their love, a bittersweet curse, becomes the one thing that makes the agony bearable. Meanwhile, General Post dons the crown of the Four Wisdoms, oblivious to the dark forces it commands. Ignoring the wizard's warnings, he relishes in his imagined ascension, believing he has finally seized ultimate power. But the crown's magic unleashes Bowberry, who exacts his revenge, slicing through the general's neck in a bloody spectacle. Post's triumph turns to horror as he's torn apart by the very forces he sought to control. In the chaos, the prisoners rise up. Franken, his monstrous strength unleashed, breaks his chains and battles his captors, a whirlwind of rage and violence. The Leprechaun King and other prisoners rally, fighting not just for freedom but for revenge against the twisted empire of General Post. The general's vision of a forever dawn ends in a ruin as his soldiers and allies fall one by one, leaving only the wreckage of his dream. At Lady Coco's stake, the Marquis holds her as he succumbs to the flames. He whispers his final goodbye, their love enduring and offering Lady Coco enough protection to allow Franken and the rest to find and rescue her. The Marquis's ashes scatter, leaving Franken and the survivors in somber reflection. They bring General Post's body outside, leaving it to rot, exposed to the elements, feeding the land he's plundered. Placing Lady Coco in a coffin protected from the sun, Franken, the Leprechaun King, and the others ride a carriage towards an uncertain future. General Post, what would you say his motivation is? Because it was kind of tough for me to figure it out. I know they go into an explanation of how he wants breakfast to be like the central thing in everybody's life, I guess, around there. I don't know. And that was some way of worshiping him. I just know he's committed some atrocities, especially against the Leprechaun Kingdom. He's also, gone out. He's created Frankenberry. He's created these monsters. What was any idea? Do you have an idea of what as a villain, what he was trying to do?
Well, I know that he's trying to get his hand on the crown of the four wisdoms, because they established during the meeting with Captain Crackle that the crown wields such power to rule, the power to raise the dead. This is not just the one ring to rule them all. This is actually a very powerful relic, and he wants to get it so he can have dominion over the Leprechaun Kingdom and use them as his army. I think it's almost an allegory for the corporatism that we have seen with some brands that have purchased so many of the other ones. I think it's the idea that he just wants them under his flag.
Okay. Whoa, I wasn't seeing that coming. That's an interesting thought right there.
It is something we've seen throughout history. We have people who it's like, I want to conquer this. It's like, why? They don't really add anything. I don't care. I want this land so then they could fly my flag and then they're under my control. That's not unheard of.
Right. And you're right, because when you see, just to use that comparison to what happens in the corporate world when it comes to the cereal market, there were plenty of times I was just talking about watching the History Channel where they were talking about conglomerates, which would take businesses and put them together. So they would probably acquire other companies, other cereals in order to broaden their kingdom. So yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Captain Crackle betrays Frankenberry, and I did look up, they call it Cherry Estates. So I'm assuming it's Cherry is the name of the estates, but Berry is their individual last name.
Got it.
And they actually ask the captain's like, so what's your payment for, betraying the Lord of the land? He says, now Cherry Estates doesn't have anyone to oversee it, do they? So he's basically saying, I'm willing to serve underneath the general as long as I can, it's kind of like the story of Xerxes. Xerxes basically says, look, you can have your land, continue doing whatever you're doing, but you have to kneel to me. When I call you to war, you fight for me. Other than that, just do whatever the hell you've been doing. That's all. And Leonidas says, no, I bow to no man. We are a free people. So I kind of get General Post Mills is doing the same thing. That's my take. I could be misreading this.
No, that's what is great about comic books, is reading this and coming away with an idea or a thought as to what was trying to be said. And I talked about earlier how Mark Russell loves to put commentary like that in his books, and it could have been just something subtle that I completely missed.
We find out that the Leprechaun King essentially sent the Phantom Beau ahead as a spy, and he found out about the Marquis and his wife being vampires and brought back the information, and the Leprechaun King is holding it over their heads. It's like, I could really use the help of the vampires, wink wink, to which we get again one of the lines that made me lose my damn mind in the waiting room, where the king asks, would it be indelicate to ask, what do they taste like, your victims. And the Marquis is trying so hard to hold up this whole, I have no idea what you're talking about. And you see him kind of go into this moment of realization of he can't deny it anymore. And he falls forward and goes, chocolate! They taste like chocolate!
Oh, and it's hilarious, but you watch this man struggle with his curse, and you can't help but feel for him too. Like, oh my gosh, he does not want but he can't help himself. He does not want to be, but as this curse just continues to make him do these things, and he doesn't want to do that. And even the leprechaun, right after the Leprechaun King's like, weep not, my friend, I came not to condemn you, but to redeem you. And so I was just taking a look here. Obviously, the Marquis decides not to go, and
he's
he wakes up
in just keeping himself and his wife alive. He knows that if he attracts too much attention to the outside world with his vampire antics, we're going to get the torches and pitchforks of an angry mob. He is like, I only kill as much as I need to. I do not want anyone coming after me. I certainly don't want anyone coming after my wife.
So he's content with staying at home. However, he doesn't think his wife is going to leave him until he wakes up the next day and sees that she left a note saying, I'm going with the Leprechaun King to face my father and put an end to this madness. By the end of that story, there's an angry mob coming towards the castle, and we're expecting something to happen. And sure enough, the following story, which is titled A Devil's Advocate, is where the Marquis is strung up, and the mob planned to burn him if it wasn't for a Quaker arriving.
Yeah, there's the Quaker Oats guy.
Yeah, the Quaker arrives in this story. Essentially, his side of things is like the vampires do the Lord's work. He gets the mob to play off and then starts to taunt. It's just him and the Marquis, and he starts to taunt the Marquis a little bit. However, near the end of the story, as he's still chained up,
the Quaker, for I am rich in oats and learning, basically agrees to. He gets the crowd to not burn the Marquis at the stake. He says, "Okay, hear me out. When the sun rises, if he's a vampire, he will burn. If he's not a vampire, he's just going to be grumpy and tired." So how about everyone comes back here at sunrise, watches the sunrise, let the sun kill him if he is a vampire. If not, so the Marquis is tied up there and he's absolutely terrified. He's like, I drove away my beloved wife. What have I done? The Quaker comes back with the key and lets him out. And yeah, as you put it, he said, just like, you are not cursed, my friend. You are the curse.
You are the curse.
And that's where we get ye crisped rice with snap, crackle, and pop coming out as carousers, drunkards, cavorters who art out late of night.
The Quaker looks for the Marquis to go, like he said, do the Lord's work, take care of these people who are out at night doing bad things. And I think that's why he frees them. It's at that point it strikes the Marquis. Okay, they expect a vampire to be here. He then turns the Quaker, grabs the Quaker and chains him up. And by the time the townspeople arrive the next morning, sure enough, they see a vampire burn at the stake, but it's not the Marquis. The Marquis has escaped. Not only that, he plans to fight alongside Lady Coco. So he's got to figure out a way to get to Castle Honeycomb now. And that's what happens near the end of that story. I will say, I was just browsing through here. Did you see the sun? Which
yes!
is the
Oh my God, that was great.
This is the sun from 2 Scoops of Raisins, whatever that one is. I can't remember the name.
Raisin Bran.
Raisin Bran.
We got a box of that over there in the kitchen. That's one of my husband's favorite cereals.
Delicious.
But yeah, I do kind of love this line because by the time everyone gets there in the morning, the Quaker is already burning and you can't see clothes or anything. They only see someone burning there, so they assume it's the Marquis. And I love it's like, justice is served. A wise suggestion by the Quaker. I'll have to thank him next time I see him. And the little line here is like, for a vampire, you should clean up nicely as they're sweeping up his ashes.
Good stuff. So the Marquis is on his way. That was chapter 5. Land of Milk and Honeycombs next, which is the climax to this book. Basically, the Leprechaun King and Lady Coco make it to Castle Honeycomb. Lady Coco tries to get in with a little bit of trickery, saying, hey, I've brought you a present. Not only did I bring you the Leprechaun King, I've brought you the Crown of Wisdoms as well. General Post lets her in. She goes in, and he's already on to her. We have in this castle Fruit Brutes and Frankenberries in there. And they're still kind of prisoners being held by General Post. The General Post takes Lady Coco, throws her out into this courtyard, chains her up, his own daughter. And
This guy is heartless.
And plans to let her catch fire and die because he believes she's a monster. And of course, she's a traitor too. Meanwhile, the Marquis makes his way there and he's able to find Lady Coco. And as the sun rises, he jumps down to protect her. Now, of course, the General Post is all excited because he's got the crown of 4 wisdoms, grabs it, puts it on his head, and sure enough, Bowberry arrives. Bowberry slices his throat and kills General Post / Mills right there. The Leprechaun King gets Frankenberry and Fruit Brute and lets them loose. There's a point where the honeycomb bee guy, I can't remember his name, whatever he was.
I think he's supposed to be a member of the clergy, Cardinal Beeman. He's a cardinal, and he's on the side of the general. We also have the general's other spy, who is Cookie Crook, for Cookie Crisp. Found out and he was the one who found out what happened with Captain Crackle and the Leprechaun King. So he was the one who was able to get the information, and that's why the general knows that his daughter's full of shit.
Right. So Frankenberry and Fruit Brute overcome their captors. General Post / Mills is dead. As they go to the courtyard, Frankenberry finds Lady Coco and the Marquis aflame. The Marquis has died, but he's able to run over and shield Lady Coco from the sun and save her life. By the end of this story, go ahead.
I was just saying he covers her with his body so that she survives.
Right.
And we have, Frankenberry and everyone rebelling because, we have Bowberry killing the general, and then the Cookie Wizard tries to take out Bo. Franken and all of them basically realize, you know what, I've had enough of this, let's fight. So we got Franken throwing a table at the Fruit Brood, biting the neck of the Cookie Crook, and Toucan Sam saying, fly away and live to see another day.
Toucan Sam. One of the things that stands out here, and this is one of my notes for this last 3, was the story of the Leprechaun King. That really stood out because they tell a little bit of backstory here. And the Leprechaun King talks about how General Post started invading his land and they're all attacking the castle. Leprechaun King's like, okay, I'm ready to die. But his brother steps up and says, no, I don't want... Let me be the king. Let them think I'm the king. You take the crown and get out of here. And Leprechaun King decides to do that. The guilt has weighed on him ever since that happened. I don't know how long ago it was when that occurred. It couldn't have been too long before these stories were being told. But regardless, he knows he left his own brother to die. So they could think that they killed the king when in fact they didn't. By the end of chapter 6, our protagonists are all headed back to wherever they're going. The Leprechaun King, they have Lady Coco in a coffin in the back, Frankenberry's in the front, riding alongside the Leprechaun King, if I remember correctly. Fruit Brute, I think, was just let loose.
The Brute, what will become of him? He's chosen his own path, and wherever it leads, at least it's his. Did you see the catapults that General Post Mills was using against him?
Oh, yeah. It's good stuff. Oh, yeah. Diggum's in here again. He's digging more graves.
2 graves.
Let me
dig them.
Let me see what I got for my notes here. I did love the fact that the queen was the general's daughter. I thought that was a neat little twist. And she decides to go try and stop him. And then we also have the Marquis who decides to finally comes to his senses and is like, okay, I need to go. I think he would have done that as soon as he realized his wife, his queen, was gone. But we had the Quaker, the whole Quaker situation.
Let's face it, the Quaker situation was just an excuse to insert. I think for a lot of people, the Quaker situation might feel a little forced in because it really doesn't have as much to do with the story as the rest, but it's still funny and it works. And I don't think it disrupts the pacing of the story. I will say that if what we talked about earlier, if this was turned into a movie, animated or live action, then you would have to move around those stories a little bit, because I think if they just stopped in the middle of the action of him going to confront the general and save his wife, and then all of a sudden he's caught by the Quaker, I think it would have completely derailed it. But in graphic novel form, it works.
Yeah. I love how Bowberry is the guy that gets stuff done. Like he shows up and he's the guy that took out Captain Crackle. And he's also the guy that's able to take care of General Post Mills as well. That's really all I had as far as my notes for chapters 4 through 6. What do you got there?
I really do love it. Little things like the cardinal is the Honey Nut Cheerios bee and he's on their side. I love the design of Fort Honeycomb.
Yes. It looks like a freaking honeycomb, which is awesome.
It looks like a really impenetrable fortress. That actually looks like a really good military stronghold. I liked it. I do like that we get to spend more time. I thought the addition of the cookie crook was a little weird, but we needed one more spy to explain why the general knows this. Good choice with the cookie crook. Although I kind of wish he had his faithful dog Crisp with him as well. But it's like, oh, come on. We could have gotten one more character in there. I do love the general's line. Dinner is the meal of the effete, the idle class who use it to occasion their opulence and persuade themselves of a worth they lack. Lunch is for dawdlers, while brunch is the meal of whores and wastrels. And the whore and wastrels are in Pop's tarts.
Pop's tarts, yes. Pop's tarts. It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I get that in the dinner one, they're asking about where Duke L'Orange is. They're asking a character named Croque Madame. And again, these are all dinners. I can't tell who the lunch characters are supposed to be parodies of. You got two workers in Lederhosen laying on a haystack and asking if they want pickled eggs. I don't recognize them, though, so I'm not sure.
Pickled eggs. I know I was looking this over, trying to pull some kind of references, but I have no idea.
Okay, Mr. Mark Russell, if you're listening, we need a wiki with all of the Easter eggs laid out in this, because some of us are just scratching our heads trying to figure out. We are children of media and watched way too many commercials growing up, but I'm still drawing a blank.
Done his due diligence. We need the answer key.
Mm-hmm. The fight scene is really good. I love Boo Berry coming in and slicing the general's neck. And when the wizard turns on him, that is the cue for the brute and for Franken to turn up and say, this is the only chance we're ever going to have, and to fight.
Frankenberry's like, there's a conversation that he has with the Leprechaun King about escaping. He asks him, why haven't you left? And he's like, well, we've tried, but no matter what, we always come back. I don't know why. I couldn't discern. Like, I figure Frankenberry could be just like the one guy that could just straight up leave, because as much as he is a Frankenstein's monster analog, he's still intelligent. He still is able to reason, it seems like. But of course, his horrible appearance keeps him from just actually trying to fit in with society. So maybe that's what it is. It's just made him decide to stay with his captors because he has no other place.
Yeah, because there's a scene where he does leave and he's attacked by the nearby villages. It's like, monster, kill it. He comes back. He is so depressed. He doesn't know about his brother, that Bo is a specter. He assumes he got his brother killed. He's like, what's the point? I have nothing I can go to. He doesn't see any hope until he sees Bo, and he sees there is a chance to rebel, that he takes a stand.
Mm-hmm. So getting into chapter 7, our final chapter here, it's really just to wrap things up, but it's not, like I said earlier, everybody lives happily ever after.
Nope, Marquis is dead and he ain't coming back.
Marquis dead. The fruit brute, he's just kind of let loose. He's doing his own thing. There's no cure for these people. Frankenberry and Bo head back to the Cherry Estates. One of the happy endings go, I would say it definitely happens for Bo, because as soon as I should say when they get there, he is changed back to a human form. Bo's changed back to a human form. Frankenberry, not the case. He's going to remain a monster, unfortunately. And I'll talk about why Booberry changed back here in a second. But yeah, Frankenberry and Boo go back, and I think there's a little bit of a resolution where Franken's like, hey, at least you're here, run the household. There's no place for me here. Perfectly content in leaving it in the hands of Bo.
But Bo says, no, you're my brother. You may not be able to be lord of this land anymore, but I'll be damned if I'm letting you run off and suffer, starve, freeze, whatever. You're staying here. And of course, we find out that the Leprechaun King is tormented by the guilt of what has happened to his land and his family. And essentially the realization that it will happen again. People will come for the crown of the four wisdoms again. He knows that there will never be peace for his land. So he puts the crown on his head and walks into the sea and
just
dies.
Straight up walks in there and dies, kills himself. Taking, of course, the crown with him, so he does, that isn't going to fall in the hands of somebody else. But yeah, I mean, that's dark. That is a dark ending for that character. But, it's this tale that's being told. It kind of fits.
The minute that the Leprechaun King dies, Bo reclaims his physical form.
That's right.
He's released from the curse, from the crown. he decides to return and run Cherry Estates. And that's when he tells Franken, because Franken sees himself as nothing but a monster. He's like, the people of the estates looked up to me and they loved me. His earlier design, he was a very handsome man. And I think he was very well loved. I look terrible. I've done terrible things in actions of the general. I am not human. I'm a monster. I shouldn't be here. And Bo, who is now returned to his human form, says, nope, you're staying here with me. No buts about it.
And then we have Lady Coco, who returns to the Marquis Castle. What we get there is her kind of acceptance, but also she has breakfast the next morning in honor of her husband. And she's going to continue to do that. It's very sad that she has to do this alone. And of course, she's a cursed vampire now. The final panel is her sitting at the table eating breakfast alone. She's looking out across the table and sees the happy memories of everybody having breakfast there. That kind of comforts her a little bit, but it's still sad because she's there to celebrate with her husband. He's not there, nor are all the people that usually come and celebrate breakfast. What are your final thoughts here? I mean, we reached the end of this. Let me ask you this first. How long did it take you to read it?
Oh, I poured through this thing in like an hour. This is not a long book.
No, it's not. It's not huge, but it's good enough to where it keeps you hooked, where you want to see what's happening next. It's easy to get through, but it tells a great story in a small amount of time. Yeah, I think I paced this out over a few days because I was making notes at the same time. It's not dense. It tells 7 good chapters of a story and it tells them well. I loved what I got here. Mark Russell, I've yet to read something where I've disliked it. And I'm not saying he's an absolutely phenomenal writer, but what I'm saying is that he could tell good stories. And this is definitely a departure from what I'm used to. And it was still good. So, that's a testament to how good of a writer he is.
Everything about this book is perfect. The artwork is great. The writing is great. The characters, even for the short time we get with them, they are very fleshed out. You understand all of them. The general is a little hard to understand, but he's pure evil. He's a jackass. That's all they were going for. I loved it. I highly recommend this book to anyone who loves the universal monsters, the serial monsters, or just good satire.
Yeah, I love, that universal monster feel is a great, that's a great point because it does fit in with this season. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoyed myself here. Okay, let's follow through. We're going to try and cast a live action film, and we'll stick with the main characters. Clearly, Toucan Sam's got to be a CGI. There's no way. I mean, this has got to be Lion King CGI or something. I don't know.
We'll get Alan Tudyk to voice him then.
Works. That works. All right. So then I guess we'll start with Frankenberry. We got to have somebody big that could handle some makeup.
Chris Hemsworth.
Okay. All right. Good enough. I'm sure there's a hefty price tag already on this movie. We got Hemsworth at the helm of Frankenberry. Booberry, going to be the younger brother. He's not going to be as big. Are we going to cast a Hemsworth?
No. All these characters are very cartoonish. I mean, Booberry, where's the first?
Oh, he looks like Tweedledum. I mean,
I have no idea who I'd cast as Booberry. I really don't.
Well, if we're going all out, we got $1 billion to spend on casting. I want somebody that's meek and kind of, I just can't see, like, my first thought was Danny DeVito, but I was like, man, he just would be also, I mean, even in his prime, you can't see him being that diminutive. Usually it's a pretty over the top personality for him.
Maybe Josh Gad.
I like that. This is the guy that voiced Olaf, right? Mm-hmm.
I think you could really play around with the vocal effects when he's in his phantom form, because Gad is Broadway trained, so he is really well how to manipulate his voice to come like that. And I think you could have a lot of fun making him sound just extra scary.
I like it. Marquis de Coco. So we want somebody that's got some regalness to them. So it's going to be an older person, an older actor. My goodness. I'm trying to think. I immediately go to some of the greats that have already passed away. Mm-hmm. But who's played a really good vampire here lately?
Someone go dig up Christopher Lee.
Who was the guy that played the vampire in the show Midnight Mass? Was it Midnight Mass?
The vampire himself was just a dude in makeup.
Who was the preacher?
Oh, the preacher. I was just talking about him the other day because he's the current voice of Batman in the Caped Crusader.
Let me know.
Hamish Linklater. And he could be a good Marquis.
He was pretty subdued in Midnight Mass, but he was creepy too. Lady Coco, did you have anybody when you saw her on here? Who would you compare her to as far as when you look at her in the comic?
I do love the design. They go full out Bride of Dracula, Spirit Halloween. She's got a bat choker and bat earrings and the high collar in the back and the super low cut peasant dress showing all the cleavage.
I was going to say, if the girl that played Wednesday Addams in Wednesday now, Jenna Ortega, if she was just a bit taller, but I like the look because she's got the goth stuff down for sure. So I'll go with that. How's that? Jenna Ortega as Lady Coco. Fruit Brute we can't do because he's just werewolf all the time. General Post Mills. I'm going for Sam Elliott.
That was the weird thing is that in the comic, the general actually looked a lot younger than I think he was supposed. Because I was thinking it's like, obviously we need someone, but it's like, no, they're supposed to be Jenna Ortega's father. So I'm not sure. I think you would want someone who would be really good at playing a member of the military, someone with a commanding bravado.
Agreed. Leprechaun King. That's the other one.
Get Peter Dinklage to play him and call it a day.
Okay. There it is. We've done it. And
Dinklage would probably refuse. He's been very much against the use of casting actors who suffer from dwarfism in the roles of leprechauns, dwarves. This is the guy who came out swinging about the Snow White remake that's coming out. All of us at the Rattlechen Broadcasting Network came out swinging because we think this movie is going to look like crap.
This is not going to be good.
It's like Rachel Ziegler is the fairest of them all. No. And what was the other word I'm thinking of? Oh, yeah. No. It's like, sorry. Gal Gadot is supposed to be worried that Rachel Ziegler is prettier than her. I'm like, okay, who thought that? Who thought that Wonder Woman was going to be jealous of Maria from West Side Story?
Well, I think we've done it. Anything else left unsaid? Did you have anything that you'd like to get off your plate here in regards to this story?
Absolutely love it. I've already got a list of people who want to borrow this. I highly recommend checking it out. Thank you again to Mr. Nate Jones for sharing that the purchase, gave me the idea to look into it. The man's got really good taste in comics. So
Agreed. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into plugs.
I will go ahead and do my personal plugs, and that is Honeysuckle Rose Creations, where fashion meets fandom at the intersection of geek and chic. Next week, the weekend of November 8th through the 10th, is our last convention of 2024, and I am heading to Minneapolis for Twin Cities Con. We just got off the wait list for that. I'm really excited, really happy to be heading up there, and after that, we're going to be getting ready for our Black Friday sale. Everything in both our Etsy and Handmade and Amazon shops are going to be 20% off. We will also be starting our charity drive. We do this every year from Black Friday to Christmas Eve. Every individual order that is placed on either of those stores, again, you can buy through Etsy or Handmade at Amazon. For every individual order, we will be donating to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. We have done this the last few years. So if you are looking for fun, geeky Christmas presents, especially if you're looking for fun horror-themed geeky Christmas presents, come check out our stores. As always, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Again, that's Honeysuckle Rose Creations, the intersection of geek and chic.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are most likely listening to this on the Source Material Comics feed, and we appreciate that. We've got all sorts of great shows here on the feed. We've got this show right here where we talk about comics of any age, any era. We have also the Unspoken Issues podcast where we talk about 90s comics. That should be a bunch of those in the archive. I think we're over 100 episodes there. The Snap Material podcast where myself and Evan Bevins get together and talk about the mobile card game Marvel Snap. Do that about once a month and drop about 4 20-minute episodes within a week. So that's a lot of fun there too. We've done it. We're out of here. That's Alexis Hannah. For Dorian Price, which, by the way, do you know the plugs off the top of your head?
Frankie Pictures. Frankie Pictures is his go-to. He's an amazing film director, coordinator. If you're looking for anything you need to have put to film, shot, look the man up. He's very talented, very good, and very dedicated to what he does.
For Dorian, for Alexis, I'm Jesse. We're out of here. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.